Hi folks, you might be wondering what I'm doing in this seemingly awkward location. Well, it's so that we can mount this, an articulating or full motion arm mount for a TV, because we're going to install a TV here also. These are great for tight locations like this, where you don't have much wall space to work with and you're not sure how you're going to work in a TV. This might be a solution. Stick around and let's learn together. I thought I would first show you the room that we're working with. This is my wife's craft room. And as you can see, there's quite a bit of craft stuff. I almost said the wrong thing there. Anyway, it looks like she's about ready to open a Hobby Lobby franchise before too long. I think that's what she's shooting for. But these are all things she needs for her various crafts. And she's fairly well optimized her available space, but that left little room on a wall for a TV. So our goal was to figure out where could we put one to where she could see things and it would be out of her way. So we opted for this little corner here, but we needed a way to mount that. And that's what this is all about. Oddly enough, we don't actually start with the bracket on the wall. What we do first is take the faceplate off the bracket and mount it to the back of the TV. And that's so that we can get a few key measurements that we're going to need to make sure we put the bracket on the wall in the right place. We don't want to hit that opening door or the ceiling once we get the TV up there. So what I'm doing now is I'm taking the screws of the appropriate size from the packaging of the mount. Actually, they were a little too long, so I had to use some spacers that came with the mount. Now, it's important to look at the instructions on your TV and on the mount to make sure everything's sized appropriately. This is a 100 by 100 millimeter Visa standard mount. There are different sizes that you might need and weight capacities you might need, so you want to take that in consideration. So what I'm doing now is I'm measuring from the top of the bracket, or at least the first screw hole, to the edge of the TV. That's to keep me from hitting the ceiling accidentally. I don't want to mount that too high or that would be a problem, obviously. And then I go ahead and get some basic measurements of the TV itself. I just want to make sure it's going to fit in that area well, and I put it where I need it. And the last measurement is to look at the bottom, basically the bottom of the bracket to the edge of the TV. Again, I want to make sure it's going to clear the door, so I'm just trying to see what I'm working with here. So I'm going to write these down because I will forget in about 30 seconds what these were. And now we're ready to make some marks on the wall. So I use my little level there to figure out where the top of the door is. That's obviously my lower limit. And then, using the measurements I took earlier, I come down from the ceiling to make sure the top of the TV won't hit the ceiling, and I figure out what range I can mount the TV in. And then I can decide exactly where I want to put it. I should also mention that finding the stud for me was easy because I could actually see the head of some nails just below the paint. So I knew what I was working with there. But then I used the level to connect the dots I had drawn, so I had a nice straight line on that stud. And that allowed me to then take the template and look through the holes in the template and just make sure they were centered with that line I had just drawn. That helped me make sure everything was where it needed to be. And that allowed me to take that template and use the pre-punched out holes in it and mark where we were going to be pre-drilling and drilling for the mount. Now that I think I know where I want it, I'll hold the bracket up there so I can make sure all the holes align and everything will work out. So I want to talk about safety just for a minute. You want to make sure where you're drilling doesn't have any electrical, plumbing, vent, gas, or other utilities that might be running in that area. This house was built in the 1940s. I'm fairly familiar with its layout, and I've looked around quite a bit right now. I'm confident there's nothing like that in this area. But if you're in doubt, always get with a professional or check. You might be able to use meters and things like that to look for those things also. Now, one of the things I like to do is I've marked my holes and I'm pretty sure where they're going to go, but I want to pre-drill with this first. I'm pretty sure I've hit a stud, but this will help me tell. And it's just a really little bitty bit. And then that way, if I'm off, I can move over wherever I need to, and I won't leave a big hole in here. From the resistance, I could tell that I was hitting wood. Now this particular wall also has lath on it, I believe.
which is the horizontal wood that you see running in some of the older houses with sheetrock on top of it. A lot of the newer houses just have sheetrock, and of course you want to make sure you hit a stud for something that's going to take this much weight, unless the instructions say you can do otherwise. And if they do, they usually have some type of anchor kit associated with it, so just follow the instructions on that. Now I have my pilot holes, and we're ready to drill for the real holes. So I'm going to take a little bit larger drill bit and drill these out. Now those smaller holes also act as a bit of a guideline to make sure I'm hitting center on those, so that helps. Now you want to try to keep the drill as level as possible and go straight in. I'm not always that great at that, but I try my best. Matter of fact, I can use the camera to look at it. Okay, let's try that. Well, I'm ready to secure the mount to the wall, and I'm going to use this. It's an adapter that allows you to use sockets. And I've got the socket that I'm just going to place on the end here after I pick it up. I'm back. Let me try that again. This is an example of I'm holding this, I'm holding this, and I'm trying to do this. I should probably set something down. Aha, went right on. Now I'll leave a link in the description for some of these tools I use here. Some of those may be affiliate links. That's one of those deals to where if you happen to buy it that way, you don't pay any more than the straight Amazon price, for example, but they might give me a little kickback if you buy something. All right, it's very important to make sure we get the top facing up and don't put this on backwards. I'm going to set this down here. Now an impact driver might be better for this when you're driving large screws and bolts like this, but I would have to go out to the shop to get mine, and we're just going to use this for now. And again, like most things, I'm not going to secure it all the way. That helps with the alignment process.
While I finish getting this mounted on the wall, you probably have time to jump over there and hit that like and subscribe button, if in fact you do like the content. I will be working on more woodworking, DIY, and even some maker type projects in the future, so we'd love to have you back to see more content. I'm going to finish up this last bolt now, and we'll be just about done with this part of the process. Now I will mention that I'll go back and tighten all those bolts. That's the last thing I do once I get everything level in the way I want it.
And now our bracket's mounted.
Now I can carefully scale that ladder there and take the TV up with me so that we can mount it. There's actually a little hook on the back of the mount plate that will attach to the arm just like that, and that'll hold it in place.
That went fairly well. Of course, if you had a larger TV, you definitely want somebody to help you with this.
Next, I have to go back and use some set screws, and this is what will actually lock the TV into place and keep it from falling off the wall. And I left the set screws just a little bit loose so that I could level it. And then once I know that the TV's leveled, I can go back and finish tightening up those set screws, and that will firmly hold it in place.
This particular unit offers a tilt feature, and at such a high height, it's probably good to go ahead and tilt it down because you're going to be looking at it from the ground level, presumably. Now we have options. We can swivel this in different angles. We can turn it this way, which is actually probably where it's going to be so that my wife can sit at her work areas and see the TV. And it's tilted down a little bit to give a little bit better viewing. Now, I'd like to say that this TV was wireless. Well, to some extent it is. It has Wi-Fi, but we have to run power still. And so we need to look at cable management for that. And that's what we're going to do next. Unfortunately, this is a very short power cord. So we're going to have to think about that when we do our cable management.
Once I get the power cable plugged in, I loop it through here and then use the Velcro that came with the arm to go ahead and secure it in place. And of course, I've got to be careful to make sure there's enough slack so the TV can still move around like it needs to without pinching the cord or being too tight and pulling on it. And that's what I'm doing here. Then we do a little bit of testing to make sure it really will move in all the directions I want it to, and everything's looking pretty good.
Now we have this unsightly piece. Let's work on that next. Now that I think about it, my wife never actually told me what she's going to use this TV for, what to watch. I like to assume it's going to be to watch my YouTube videos. Yeah, I'm just going to assume that. So I got me an extension cord and plugged it in. Unfortunately, the outlet is toward the floorboard, of course, and offset from the TV. So I'm going to plug this in, and this should do it, but that's a little unsightly. So we're going to do something about that. And while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and pull this plastic off, because pulling the plastic off is part of the fun part. That's very satisfying. I made sure I got a long enough cord that I could wrap this part up here and the cord would still reach. And then we're going to cover this up. I'll show you that in just a second. This is what I got to cover up the cable. It's a cable cover set made by EVEO, however you say that. I think it will do the job. I'd prefer to have a one piece that runs all the way down because it would be easier to install, but I happen to have this, so I thought I would use it. I will provide a link to this, but you can get something like this from anywhere. I was impressed by this particular kit because when I opened it, I'm surprised to see that it came with a knife to cut the plastic where you need it to get it to the length. And it came with a number of various covers and angles to help get you where you need to go. That way, if you need to take a right angle with it, you can do that and cover up the joint, which is pretty cool. But because it is in segmented pieces, I'm going to have to put this together as we go down the wall. But we'll go ahead and start that. This set even came with a little tape measure. We won't use it, but it's kind of neat they threw it in there. Now, the way these work typically is I can slide these off. Once I get them up there, sliding them won't be an option. So you basically have to pinch the plastic material and get underneath there, and then you can pull it off like this. And there's two little tongues on the side that allow you to put it back together and snap it in place. This particular unit comes with double-sided tape. That's usually okay. You might want to keep an eye on it. If you find that the double-sided tape starts coming loose, usually you can sink a couple little screws in there to keep it in place if you really need to. But we'll try it with the double-sided tape and see how that goes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take several of these pieces and I need to make sure I get them in a straight line and plumb. As plumb as I can get it. Now this first piece isn't going to have any cover on the end of it. I'm just going to run the cable straight into it.
This part is pretty easy. The key is just making sure you get that first piece started where you really want it and making sure it's plumb, and I use the level for that. Then you need to press it in place really well and just work your way down piece by piece, just making sure that the pieces of track align with the one above it so that it forms a nice straight line. This is where having a single piece of track would be a little bit easier. You wouldn't have to go through this step. But this works well, and it ends up looking good afterward. And we're just about to the last piece before we're going to have to do something special here.
Now we're at the bottom of the trim, and I have to figure out how long to cut this last piece. I'm going to run it horizontally about here, so I want to leave enough room for that. So I'm going to stop about right here, and that should give me enough room to just run that piece right there. Now I get to use this cool knife that came with this kit. This cut does not have to be perfect because the joint is going to cover it up, but you want to try to get it straight. So I got the piece cut, but it's a little rough on the edge. Could take a little knife and clean it up. This will be covered though by that joint. Just make sure that you point that downward away from where the seam that's going to be seen is. This will be our last piece going in this direction. So we have to take this into consideration. We do not want to install this and put it all the way up as far as it goes. Because if I do that, it's bottomed out here and there's no room for the cord to come around. We want to go to about here. That will cover the cord up and do what we need it to do so it looks good. So I'm going to put it about there, and then that tells me that my next piece of track needs to come here in height, but the same thing applies here. We don't want it any closer than this, because if we bottom out that piece of track, it will also pinch off the cord. What we need to do now is place this where it needs to go. And again, put the rough cut side where this joint's going to be so that it's covered. You may not have seen me do this on the down pieces, but what I was actually doing was putting the level in place first, so I had it where I wanted it, and then putting the piece up next to that, and that made this process a little easier, especially with the double-sided tape, because if you put it on there and then you try to micro-adjust it like I did with the very first piece, you probably find it's going to stick, and then if you have to pull it off, you're going to weaken the double-sided tape. We're ready to do some reassembly. I'm going to start at the top and work my way down. Now there are some things you want to consider about the channel, and that is the depth of the channel compared to the wires that you're going to put in there. In this case, I'm just putting this one. Now it's fairly thick, but I think this will work. But if you were putting multiple wires in here, bunches of them, or something much thicker, you might need a deeper channel. The other thing to consider is if you're running any type of Ethernet through a channel like this, and you have power running, you never want to run them like this in parallel to each other. You can get crossover with the power to the Ethernet, and it can ruin your Ethernet. Of course, that's pretty old school, which I am old school. Most things are wireless nowadays, so you don't have to worry about that kind of thing. So let's put this back together. So what we do is we just get the cable in the channel, get it where we need it, and snap it in place. Okay. And while I'm doing this, I will mention there are other options for this. There are some options that can have grommets in the wall. You can drill through the wall, drop your cables down, and then come out someplace lower. That's a really clean look. A lot of times it's better for new installation. It's a little bit harder with existing insulation once the sheetrock's on, but that's something to consider. There are some kits that you can do it with existing installation. The problem can be if you have fire braces in your wall which run this way, then you're not going to be able to drop the cables down necessarily to get them as far down as you want them. But it is something to consider as an option depending on your circumstances. But something like this is a good alternative. Many of these tracks can also be painted, so they can match an existing wall, and then they won't stand out as much. With this goldish yellow color and the white, I think it's going to be fine like this. It's also a craft room, which is very crafty, but I can't throw any stones. You've seen my shot. Okay, we're ready to install this short little piece here. Oh, I did what I said don't do. I put the cut side up. That would show. Let's do that again. Now it is important to consider how big your cables are, how many your cables are, and can you get them around a right angle like that. In this case, this cord is flexible enough, that's not going to be a problem. And I'm going to go ahead and feed this excess back in here. Hopefully never to be seen again. And then we will apply this last piece. Make sure I get the right cut side. Yep, like this. And now this piece, which covers up this corner. And now we have a nice clean joint. It's out of the way. And you can see this runs along the side and it's hidden behind this big rack of fabric. Okay, now we can get our TV where we want it. And this is, you got a lot of options because of this articulating arm. So you can just play with it and get it how you want it. In this case, it's hanging out in the open over the door. Get it where the glare is not on it too much. And the door opens free and clear. It can be free of the fabric. If you wanted it to, you could even come over here, put it more in the corner. That's a good option too. Just leave it out like that. If for some reason in the future you want to come over in here, you can do that too. But you'll probably buy more fabric and then it wouldn't fit. Well, folks, that's it for this one. Now my wife can watch all my videos while she's in here doing her crafts, because I'm sure she will. See you next time.